for that. That was great. So I love that previous presentation because it got me fueled up, I have to say. Because I actually pretty much contradict everything that the prior speaker said to about a couple of different things. So I'm here to talk a little bit about a concept that actually is changing a lot of processes in IT to reducing conflict and overhead and heavy laden burden processes to something that produces results quickly. Now, how many of you guys have read the Phoenix Project for DevOps? A few of you. I would suggest that our previous speaker also read the book because there are 3 things about the Phoenix Project and DevOps that I think that we all could learn a lesson from. One is, it is about the process. It's about the flow, right? The second thing, well, you guys can read it. I'm actually going to read it specifically because the third thing goes exactly to his point. I had to look this up because I wanted to make sure I got the words right. The first way is work always flows in one direction downstream. That's process. The second way is create, shorten, and amplify feedback loops. The only way that we can improve what we're doing is if we know where we made mistakes and have that feedback immediately when you're making the mistake so that you can correct it and not wait for the impact and have to go back upstream to redo it. The only way that that works is if you have a process. Now, the third way, which goes directly to our previous speaker's point, is that continued experimentation in order to learn from mistakes and achieve mastery. You have to build in the re-education into the process, and that's what artificial intelligence is actually all about. It's making it better by learning from where things work and when things don't work. I really applaud the previous presenter because I think that, one of the things that, I've joined IBM. Let me give a little context about myself. So my name's Julie Lockner. I'm Director of Portfolio and Process Optimization for IBM Data and AI. So what that means is for all of the products that are in this heavy architecture that was references, there were over 8,000 products when I joined about 2 years ago. We've reduced that down to about 800 strategic projects. And the reason why I mention that is because, we all can learn. IBM has been in the market for over 100 years. There's not very many companies that are in the IT industry that have reinvented, learned from broken processes, and fixed it and are continuing to survive. So my responsibility is to use data from all of those products and processes, interactions from your organizations, and identify ways to make our products more meaningful. And when we thought about what is the thing that's going to drive the most economic change in the next decade, it's artificial intelligence and machine learning. And if you don't believe it, take a look at, for any of you that have children that are at least 25 years or older, I have 4. So unlike the first speaker, I have 3 boys and a girl. So my house is completely destroyed by sports artifacts. But if you look at the last 2.5 decades, and you think about how our children watched Disney movies, the technology has changed so quickly from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray to Netflix to any iPhone app that you can imagine. And the only way that we're able to do that is because the technology has innovated, we've adapted, our children have adapted, and we're able to take advantage of things like DevOps so that these artifacts, these information systems can be agile, constantly modify, constantly reinvent so that we produce the best solution for our customers immediately. So I talk about the AI ladder. I don't actually look at the AI ladder in and of itself as a process. It's really a categorization, a simplified way to look at all of the things that we need to master so that we can achieve the economic gain. Now, artificial intelligence and machine learning really does, I'd say, a couple of things, right? It's not magic. You heard that from Andrew and our first speaker, just for those of you that got his name wrong. It does 3 things, right? It predicts. Andrew Brown was his last name, just so you know. It's not a tricky last name. It predicts, it automates, and it optimizes, right? It's computer science. It's not magic, right? But if you really think about, if you can have a better prediction model, you can reduce risk. Makes sense, right? If you can automate, you can turn the mundane job of IT into an automated push-button task so that your teams can actually focus on the part that's fun, the thinking, the creative part of IT, right? And the third one is optimize. If you can optimize the path from here to there, then you can increase your productivity gain, you can increase revenue, reduce loss. And by the way, optimization is a process. So when we think about the AI ladder, all of these steps in that journey are all about making sure that you have the core concepts around how do you collect data, how do you organize it, how do you make governance part of the process so you don't have to think about it, and you just get the benefit of knowing, trusting, and being able to use the data. Giving it to the folks that are going to analyze it, whether it's a team that's doing analytics or it's a machine doing machine learning and learning on its own, you have to make sure that the raw materials, that oil that you're giving to that high-producing engine is of refined quality. And then you want to make sure that it sticks. You don't want a project that you've invested years in on artificial intelligence and not have it part of the daily process. All right, how many of you guys use a word processing tool? And if you don't raise your hand, I can tell you're not paying attention. Okay, everybody raise your hand. This is part of the Get Engaged. Word processing. Now, how many of you could spell without the little red squiggly line? We all, okay, well maybe some of you guys are better than me. I have an engineering degree. I depend on autocorrect. It's part of how I write my documents. If I don't have it, no one understands what I'm trying to say. It's all phonetic. Now think about it. It's invisible to the process. You don't see it. It's just automatically there. Now, how many of you checked the weather before you came to Stockholm? Or if you're in Stockholm, how many of you checked the weather? Yeah, see, there we go. We got the engagement going. Think about how complicated it is to take all of the sensors from all the information systems around and compile a prediction of what the weather's going to be like so you know what to wear. Right? It's invisible to our process. It's embedded into all of our airline ticketing systems. Everywhere you book a travel, the first thing it says is the weather is going to be sunny in Stockholm today. Who would have thought? Right? It's invisible to us, and that's what artificial intelligence. So in order for you to have the economic impact and the value, it has to be infused into the day-to-day things that you do. Right? So how do you develop those competencies in a world where things go from VHS to Netflix in a matter of one childhood? You have to have something that's agile, that can evolve with the estate that your technology is sitting on, right? And that's what this AI ladder is intended to do, is really to help facilitate a better conversation with the folks that have mastered the discipline and databases. This conference is all about organizing governance and analyze. If you go to an AI conference or an analytics conference, they're going to be talking about how to best build visualization dashboards so executive management can read it. And Infuse is all about making it part of the day-to-day process. Now, I spent a lot more time on this slide than I intended to, only because I had to make sure that when you think about IBM, you're not just thinking about heavy processes, but how can you improve the vernacular and the vocabulary that your teams are using. This is a simplified way to do it. It's not very complicated at all, in fact. But let's drill down into the organize. This is what we're here about. If we all had this mastered, we wouldn't be here. So the fact that you're all here, thank you, because we're always learning. It's a growth mindset, right? Organize, when you think about, once you have the data and you're going to be delivering it, so you have an input, a process, and an output, we're the process team. We really are. We're the ones that help organizations and people know what data they have, know that they can trust it because they've understood where it came from, its lineage. What was the context? Well, guess what? Context is data. It's just called metadata. And then once you can trust it, then you can use it. You can make it available and democratize it for all of your consumers, right? Know, trust, use. And then if you think about, well, what is the technology that you need to master? What are the capabilities, competencies? It's data integration. It's data quality, master data management, data governance and curation. It's the process of turning that raw crude oil to refined product in the gasoline tank. And now there's a new term, data preparation. And because data has become so available, how do you make it easy for the folks that want to do self-service analytics, or the data scientists that are so bloody expensive, I think I heard someone say earlier. How do you optimize their time so that they're spending more time doing the really cool stuff that's going to change your business versus the mundane task of turning that data from crude to refined product, right? The one common denominator that we've definitely seen as the thread across the bottom is if you can catalog your data, if you can capture the metadata, the context of that data as quickly and early as often as possible, it makes a lot of this process much more simplified. Now you can tell I'm fired up by the previous presentation because it gets me excited. Now I mentioned I have 4 kids, and I want to start talking a little bit about the impact, and then we're going to talk about DataOps. You with me? You guys good? All right. You can tell I've had 2 cups of coffee this morning. So think about how long it takes every time you have a data change in a source system or someone wants to augment your retail database with weather data. How long does it take for that data to then start impacting processes for your business users? In this particular retailer, it took 3 weeks so that every time there was a change, 3 weeks later, it would start to impact the things like customer affinity analysis, inventory stock positions. That's bad, right? How long does it take for you to decide whether you're going to buy something? If you go to Amazon, if you see it's available, you'll buy it. If it says, I don't know, come back to me in 2 days, I'll let you know if it's going to be available, you're going to go on to something else, right? It's make or break if you don't have that information available right away. Every day that you don't have this update available is revenue lost. It's screaming kids who didn't get their favorite toy on the day that they were promised, right? Let's turn it around. This particularly leading retailer implemented a DataOps process. They were able to turn the process upside down, and they were a very data-centric approach. They went from 3 weeks to less than 2 minutes. The impact that it's had is now they can determine at the end of the day if their A/B testing actually works, and they can pretty much estimate within 4 hours, and they're working on making it within 4 minutes. They wouldn't have been able to do this if they had stuck to a waterfall approach where things were done in silos. An international bank. If you made a transaction and then you wanted to take money out of the ATM machine, and that transaction didn't process for, let's say, a day, how many checks might you bounce if you took money out of the ATM machine and you over-withdrew, right? It creates huge dissatisfaction. So think about the fact that if you don't process those records in time, you have an issue with data quality, right? You can't trust that the bank actually has processed the information properly. Trust is huge when it comes to your own personal money. Well, this bank, what they did is they turned their processes upside down. They went from waterfall and agile to a DevOps approach. And I use DevOps because that's really what we're talking about. DevOps, but instead of releasing applications, we're releasing data for use. They were able to streamline their processes and get the quality issues at the core. That's what DevOps is all about, right? DevOps is about identifying application quality issues when the developer posts that code, runs it in a test environment, and gets immediate feedback. Immediate feedback and can fix the problem right away. Now think about it. Net Promoter Score is something that is now becoming quite a standard for how we measure ourselves, right? Well, Net Promoter Score is relatively new, but it is the #1 opportunity to get real-time feedback on how you're doing. In fact, one of the big transformations that IBM has made is that we are all measured on Net Promoter Score. What that means is that I have to report to Ginny on a regular basis what I'm doing to improve Net Promoter Score. And if it goes down, I'm in the hot seat, and I'm the one justifying why we need to fix something. I don't like that position. I'm sure it makes anybody a little nervous talking with your chairman. But the idea is, at least we're getting the feedback right away, right? If we're not getting the feedback right away, we could be releasing products and then 2 years later find out that no one is going to use them, no one's bought them, and then we have this massive thing called sunk cost, right? So I look at these as this is the impact that we all want to walk away with, ideas that we can take back to our own shops so that we can start to make an improvement. So I'm going to spend the rest of my conversation sharing with you what does this mean. Let's unpack it a little bit. Let's get a little more pragmatic, bring it down to earth. So DataOps is a term that was coined, actually the first, when I did a Google search, I looked at the first instance of DataOps, and there was a blog written by an IBMer, I think in 2004, and it talked about bringing DevOps practices to data. And it was kind of remarkable. I mean, a lot of things that come out of IBM, are in its early infancies in research, and it takes a few years for it to show up. But I even saw in a lot of the booths out here, besides IBM, that DataOps is a term that's actually getting quite a bit of recognition. And actually, for the vendors out there that have it, we're all in this together. Gartner came out with this quote. I mean, I agree with some of it. Gartner says DataOps is a collaborative data management practice focused on improving communication, integration, and automation of data flows between data managers and data consumers across an organization. That sounds like input, process, output. Now, what this doesn't talk about, though, is it's not just about what I call data flows. It's about all of, to my previous speaker's credit, it's all about the context in which that data flows. So when a change in a data artifact happens, why did it change? Who is responsible for it? How do I quickly go back and fix all my downstream reports? How do I know who to call? And if they're on vacation, can I trust the process will make sure that if that person's out, I'll have someone else I can talk to right away? Because that's never happened to any of us, right? No one ever goes on vacation in Sweden. That was a joke. See, the Swedes got that. All right. So I want to share with you a couple things. And again, I think if you haven't read the Phoenix Project or been a student of DevOps, and what I'm describing makes sense to you, I do suggest taking a purchase of those two books, the DevOps Handbook and the Phoenix Project, because it really does take something that's proven in lean manufacturing, the Toyota manufacturing process, shows how it's eliminated a lot of the bottlenecks that things like information security, InfoSec, and IT ops has had on the application development process. Now, we have the same problem in data management, right? We've got GDPR, we've got, BCBS, we've got any, in the US now it's CCPA. I could come up with a bunch more acronyms and we would all fall asleep if we actually knew what they meant and read the definition. But the idea is that we have a constant conflict between making data available for our users and the increased pressure to meet regulatory compliance and this thing called privacy, which is kind of ironic because now that social media is like the norm for our kids, I mean, I see a few millennials in here. I mean, you were born with Facebook in your pocket, right? It's all about sharing. So now that we've got all of these security policies and privacy policies that we have to adhere to, it's a constant struggle. Like, what do you share, and what do you give people the opportunity to unshare and make sure that IT and data management complies? So DevOps did that for application and application security and IT operations. Let's apply that same thing to data. And so this whole idea of data operations then, it starts to actually, it's like turning on a light in a dark room. Now you'll notice on the bottom, AI and analytics and this thing called AI ops. Maybe we're getting a little ops crazy. Maybe a lot of us really do believe in process. But if you think about it, right, if the next evolution is building machine learning and AI models to take advantage of the economic improvement we were promised from the analysts, why not apply the same principles to building models, right? If you're going to publish a model and it fails, why not have an operational framework that allows you to see, oh, there's a problem with my data right away, or there's a problem, I've got bias in my model, I need to quickly update it, and I want to deploy it in a matter of seconds, not weeks and months, right? And the whole idea is that governance is in the middle. If this were properly, so I'm sorry, I'm not in marketing, but my governance box in the middle is supposed to be the Venn diagram that crosses them all. You don't hear people in DevOps talking about a heavy governed process, right? It's just part of it. It's integrated into it. It's something that's somewhat invisible. And that's what we really want, right? We don't want everyone to be, oh, here come the governance guys, governance guys. We don't want them to run away. We want them to say, hey, aren't you the DataOps person that gave me trusted data? I need more. I can't wait. And you were so fast. You did it so quickly. And actually, my users trusted it. I mean, that's what we want, right? We don't want to be talking day in, day out about governance. We'll do it in this room because we're in group therapy. But after today, we can go back to our offices and say, you know what? Actually, it is about process. We just got to flip it around so it's a little bit more responsive to your needs. So I call it DataOps in action, right? Know, trust, use. If you know what data you have and you can understand where it came from so you can trust it, then you can make it available for people who are allowed to use it. We're good. So we're going to use this a couple times. Know, trust, use. In fact, it's funny, I presented at another conference, and by the end of the day, I had customers coming up to saying, this is my know department, this is my trust department, and this is my use department. And I said, well, what do you have integrating it? And they said, arrows. So I said, well, that's good. I'm glad that that's working for you. Okay, so remember we talked about the impact. We talked about this retailer that took weeks, maybe months, to update their analytics reports and everything like that because they have this data pipeline bottleneck. And if you look at all of the things that are in the operations that are part of our collective teams, it's discovering data, especially when people put it in someplace and you didn't know about it. It's understanding it, metadata, context. It's ingesting it into data lakes, right? Integrating it, assessing quality, cleaning it, maybe even prepping it and making it available, right? We know that this is a huge amount of burden for our teams because a lot of it does take manual tasks. In fact, before I went back to school to get my master's at MIT Sloan, I ran a consulting company where I implemented data governance programs for large banks. And I made a lot of money building spreadsheets because it was all manual task. And then I did this proof of concept comparison. I had all the vendors come in for my client, and they did a bake-off. And the tool that won and put me out of a job was from IBM. So I'm saying this because what it did is it automatically discovered these data sources, it inventoried it, it recommended a classification. Now this was 15 years ago, so it was pretty crude. The user experience looked like it was built like a developer, so I understood it. My customers didn't. But the idea is at the end of that process, right, they had something that they could actually use within a very short period of time. Now, we use spreadsheets to manage it, and we use things like business process management workflow so that people checked off on these artifacts, and it was slow. But when I saw what the power of something like automating it with machine learning and intelligence back then, I knew that this market was in for an opportunity to transform. And it really has to do with where the data pipelines are built. So let's talk about this quickly. So if we can shrink the amount of time it takes to prepare that data and make it available for the build, run, manage, we're talking about agile, automated, and collaborative, right? So those are the three key words. So DataOps consistently delivers, this is what your new team's mission statement should be, delivers high quality data fast by streamlining the data pipeline process, right? So if you guys want to jazz up what you call your teams, call them DataOps and give them this mission. We're all about speed. High quality data fast, right? Well, the first thing it requires is automation, right? So all of those mundane tasks that we heard from the previous speaker, automated data curation services, automated metadata management, self-services, make the data available, automated core governance services, automated mastering the data, hybrid data integration and data virtualization, right? These are the capabilities that you need to identify where you have people doing it and look for ways that it can be automated, right? That in and of itself is going to save you mountains of spreadsheets, mountains of time, and man hours that you can put into something that's going to be much more focused on the economic improvements of AI and machine learning. It's a little bit of the infomercial, why IBM. If you hadn't noticed, IBM spent about $34 billion to acquire Red Hat. And a lot of folks ask us, that's a big investment. Yeah, but you know what's really important about this is two things. One is that we do recognize that open source is the future. And a lot of folks look at technology that came from IBM as very proprietary, heavy technology. Well, the reality is that, I don't know if you know this, but IBM is probably one of the third largest contributors to open source in the industry. So part of it is brand, right? IBM has a brand and is known for things that are potentially considered proprietary. But at the same time, right, they are also known for technology that runs and doesn't break, right? Mainframe is still here. Hate to tell you guys if you hadn't noticed that, it's still running, and it's still running most of our banking transactions and processes, right? But the reality is any new workload, any new application, if it's not built using containers, and things like Kubernetes and built on an OpenStack platform, good luck finding a developer that can help you with your projects, right? Any new kid coming out of college today, they're looking for, on their resume, they want to know, where can I contribute to an open source project, and where can I have impact and value because I do believe in open source, right? So Red Hat really brings a lot of that. In fact, sometimes we even hear that a lot of the culture shift is going more towards Red Hat than Red Hat to IBM. So keep a lookout that and keep me honest on that one. So let's talk about what DevOps did for application development, right? It's all about turning bottlenecks into opportunities. So if you look at this flow diagram, right, we talk about the sources on the right and the targets on the left. And you think about the process I just talked about, auto discovery, auto data and business classification, auto quality. Everything should be stored with its context in metadata repositories like catalogs, right? Everywhere where you see that little flow, that is where DataOps workflow and collaboration is crucial. And the reason why this is important is because processes break mostly on the handoff between departments, right? We all see it. We see, oh, I handed that to this team, and that person is out, and it's just been sitting in an inbox forever, right? So this is where the opportunity is to look at your pipelines. Where are you seeing the bottlenecks? Identify, pinpoint it, associate it to a business opportunity or a business loss, and that's where we start. We're not talking about a big, heavy process. We're talking about starting with something that will have an economic impact that aligns with the priorities of your business. So which group do you want to be? The group that spends all of your time on one project, where 80% of it is on data prep, completing one experiment, and then it failing, and then trying to justify your business? Or do you want to be the group that does 100 experiments, is able to quickly iterate, agile through, find the one diamond in the rough, have success that justifies all of these projects, right? We all want more, faster, better. I mean, that's what we want. The only way you're going to do it is if you can free up the time associated with things like data prep. And I use that as an example, but fill in the blank for the part of your process where your teams get stuck. And that's where you start, right? So you heard before we talked about product technology. One thing I wanted to bring up is the term Watson at IBM is always associated with the Jeopardy game, right? It was a technology that beat a human being in a contest, right? Well, now you start to see the Watson term being used everywhere. And the reason why we use it everywhere is because we're taking a lot of those APIs and technologies and we're embedding it into our very own products. So I use this as an example because when you hear things like Watson Knowledge Catalog or Watson Studio or Watson Machine Learning, what that means is we're deliberately taking capabilities from the Jeopardy game and making it available in practical applications like governance. Now, I know I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to zip through some of these slides, and I believe these are probably going to be available for everybody afterwards. Believe me when I say, having been in this business, that there's a massive amount of opportunity to make an impact in your organizations by leveraging some of these technologies, whether it's from IBM or from other companies in the market. If you're not automating that process of cataloging, curating, and making data available, then you're missing out on the opportunity. And when you think about the DevOps tool chain that your teams have and your counterparts, spend time with them, buy them lunch. Find out how are they able to streamline that process? How have they been able to improve workflows so that they can take advantage of modern technology or even modern social networking tools like Kafka or Slack for that matter, so that you can start to innovate, iterate, and update. So real quick things. The way that we get started with our organizations, we announced last week a DataOps Center of Excellence. What that is a team of experts that are helping organizations identify those bottlenecks. We recommend, if you want to take advantage of our garage workshops, they're all about the design thinking process and building an MVP process in a matter of a day, defining it and implementing it and getting results within a matter of 6 weeks. In this material, in the presentation slide, you'll find more details about each of these. I'm out of time. I apologize for not being able to go through all that, but I just couldn't help resist but refuting some of my previous speakers' definition of IBM. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.